Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark, and today I'm joined by guest Kartick Vaddadi. Kartick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
How'd I do on the soft T?
Not bad.
But not bad. All right, I'll keep trying. Well, let's start off, if you could, by telling folks a little bit about who you are and what you do to give them some context for this conversation.
Sure. I used to work at Google. I worked there for almost 9 years. Then I did a stint as an independent app developer, trying to build and sell an app by myself to make a living. I then ran a startup called FutureCam for 3 years, bootstrapped. The tech part worked very well, but not the business part.
What was it?
It's called FutureCam.
FutureCam.
It's an iPhone camera app. I'll just send you the link, which you can put in the show notes if that's okay.
Sure. How long were you there?
3 years. After that, I ran a services company with the same team from the startup.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I took up a stint as a CTO.
Okay.
Along the way, I have advised maybe 20, 25 startups over the years.
Okay.
For the last year and a half, I've been working as a consulting CTO. And I've been listening to the show, including all the back episodes. Very happy to be here for a change.
Someone's going to be listening to you in a back episode.
Awesome.
Okay, so we've exchanged a couple of emails in advance of this. What challenges are you facing? What can we talk about? What could we try and unblock? What are the main things on your mind?
So the biggest thing on my mind is lead sources or marketing. Because once I'm talking to somebody, if they are within the target audience, the sales part of it and the actual delivery of the service, I've got it under control. But the lead gen part, the marketing part, is a bit of a challenge for me. So would love your insight there.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a pretty common challenge for people. But you feel like once you get the right person on the phone, then you can close the deal if it's a good fit, and delivery is no problem. Before we jump into leads, are you happy with how are you pricing deals that you close?
So all the deals I've done in the past were hourly, and this is pre-ditching hourly.
Right.
So nowadays I'm offering fixed prices, and I've set up a bunch of packages on my website. If you want scalability, it costs a certain amount of money. If you want a company upgrade, which is where I diagnose what's going wrong in the company, be it tech, be it people, be it project management, be it the culture, and I fix it. That package has a certain price.
Got it.
So I'm trying to come up with fixed prices nowadays, though hourly is still an option if I feel that it is too risky for me to offer a fixed price, as we've discussed earlier.
Sure. Okay. And are the packages, are they time boxed, or is it kind of like a monthly amount and you'll just keep going month over month?
Yeah, they're both time boxed and scope boxed. So scalability package, for example, lasts for 6 months, and I'll be working only on scalability, anything that contributes to increasing the scalability, which is more users simultaneously on the servers, as we know.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
it is limited both ways.
Great. Sounds good. And you're happy with that. You're happy with your pricing, it sounds like. So cool. Love to hear it. All right. So let's talk about leads. You said that you are not having a problem closing deals if you get the right person on the phone. So who's the right person?
The right person is a founder of a startup which has raised at least $1 million, which is typically seed or series A, all the way till series C.
Where do you normally find those folks? Like, how do they find you, or how does the relationship begin with, say if you think of the last client you had, or the last couple of clients, is there a typical way that those folks find you now?
Sure. There are 3 lead sources that worked for me. One is personal connections. The other is referrals from personal connections, like second degree. And I did receive one inbound cold connect that led to a substantial engagement. So these are the 3 lead sources that worked for me.
Okay.
I tried a whole bunch of things. Should I go over them? These are the things that didn't work.
Sure.
So one is I got access to Traxen, which is a database of startups and companies where you can filter in various ways by revenue and by year of founding and so on. And I tried outbound and LinkedIn connections to companies that fit a certain profile. That didn't work. Maybe my message needs to be better, but whatever the reason, that didn't work. I am on various Slacks, such as there's an ex-Googler Slack. There's one for iOS engineers. There's a whole bunch of Slacks which I'm on. So when appropriate, I tried to kind of mention that I'm a consultant and, we could have a conversation, but that didn't work. I asked friends to post about me in various groups about entrepreneurship, be it Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, Discord, Slack, whatever it may be, where I am not a member.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, a WeWork group in Bangalore. I talked to companies that are hiring a full-time CTO, and I tried to pitch my services there saying, what problems do you have? Would you like me to solve them in parallel with you hiring a full-time CTO?
Mm-hmm.
I listed on expert platforms like DeepBench.
Okay.
I tried to set up deals with other consultancies and agencies, like individual consultants and agencies both. I also tried talking to a few investors
Okay.
to take either a portfolio services approach where they pay me and then I'm available to all startups, under their umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
or referrals.
Okay.
So these are the lead sources that didn't work.
Okay. So let's jump back. Okay, that's excellent, and quite a number of things that you tried. These are all things that do work or can work sometimes. So it's a good list. So I'll be interested to drill in and sort of quiz you about the specifics of some of them. But let's go back to your startup founder who's raised at least $1 million. Tell me more about that person. If you think back to your best clients, your most ideal clients where you felt like you hit a huge home run for them or they were really happy. Tell me more about those folks. Are they technical, non-technical, risk takers, not risk takers? Are they, I don't know, are they in the US? Are they not in the US? Like tell me more about the best fit actual buyers, not the target market itself.
Sure. They've all been in India, and I'm looking to move out of India, specifically to the US and to developed countries in general. But so far, they've all been in India. They have been predominantly business founders and CEOs. In a minority of cases, CTOs have hired me, but primarily it's the business people. And they have raised funding. Now they are on the hot seat. They're supposed to deliver. They have problems. The problems can be the tech doesn't work properly. It crashes, it hangs, it's full of bugs. It can be project management. Features are never delivered. The customers are yelling at us.
Mm-hmm.
It can be culture. We have attrition. Even the people who are in the company are perhaps kind of uninterested in working in the problems. And, the engineering team is unhappy. The business people within the company, not just the founders, but the business teams like the marketing team and the sales team are unhappy with the technical deliveries. They're like, why don't we get the deliveries on time? And why does it not work properly when it is delivered? And all these things. So typically they have problems across the board and they're helpless. It's out of their skill set. They've tried a few things, didn't work. Now they have the money and they don't have time. So that's typically the situation in which I'm called in.
Okay. And so they're on the hot seat because they need to start delivering and everyone's getting mad at them, whether it's the investors, their own team, their customers, beta customers, whatever they might be. Okay. And how far into the process are they? You know what I mean? Like how old is the company at this point, do you think? Or not actually in reality, like your best clients, how old was the company when you came on board?
So if I think back to the two recent big engagements, one of them was a company that was just getting set up. This wasn't a startup. This was a company that was set up as set up within a conglomerate. That was a 20th century industrial company, like a 5-decade, 6-decade-old company. Mm-hmm. They decided to branch out into tech and they set up like a separate company. Right. So in this case, I was brought in as the company was being set up. Mm-hmm. And there were only the CEO and 1 or 2 people at that time. In the other case, the other engagement, mm-hmm. It was a startup that was running for 5 years. One of the investors bought out the founders. They basically the founders decided to pursue a different business strategy from what they were doing earlier. And the investor said, hey, why don't abandon what you have been doing because that itself has value. If you are not interested, do you mind if I continue running that? So they kind of split the company into 2. And yeah, so I was brought in maybe 6 to 9 months after the split happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So no pattern really. I mean, like those 2 things that you just said are completely different.
Yeah, but if I look at the previous engagements, the typical pattern is that the company has been around for a while. Like it's not just 1 year old. they've had the time to try things and see them fail.
Okay.
People who have not yet gotten around to trying things, who are still, on the drawing board, typically they don't find the need for my service, or at least that's how they perceive it. They're like, we'll just go ahead and execute. After a year or two, the execution isn't working. That's when they call me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So tell me more about the type of startup that's the best fit for you. So probably not a, I don't know, fast fashion brand, I'm guessing. Like what I'm just guessing since you're an ex-Googler and you're talking about scale, it's some kind of SaaS, B2C SaaS, B2C SaaS, or,
Yeah, could be.
or what?
Yeah, I mean, could be B2B or B2C. I worked in different sectors, be it fintech, be it developer tools, and so on. One of them, for example, was focused on mental health. So it's really sector agnostic, B2B, B2C agnostic. And what was the other part of your question? Sorry.
So, but they're all technology based, right?
Absolutely. Technology is core to them. It's not like, let's say, a 30-year-old bank that has a website and they have internet banking, but they are like a traditional company. They're not competing based on their tech, right? They're competing based on their brand and their branch network. There's a branch a kilometer from my house. So that's what they're competing on. The people I work with, tech is core. If the tech doesn't work, the company doesn't work.
Okay. And is it always, well, not even always, but like best case scenario, is this hardware-based tech, software-based tech, something in between?
All of them have been software, except for one lead, which didn't go anywhere. But the ones I worked with were all software.
Okay. And are these like, can you give us like more context there? So is it like mobile apps? What is it?
So yeah, maybe I'll give you context both into the companies and what I did for them. Will that help?
Yes.
Cool. So yes, some of them have been mobile apps. One of them was a Chrome extension. The mental health startup I was talking about. They were building a porn blocker as a Chrome extension. And there's a lot of work on the back end and DevOps and so on. So really platform agnostic.
Okay.
Regarding the work I did for them, in one case, I hired 3 leads for the company.
3 like tech leads?
Yeah, tech leads, managers, architects, people like this. Some cases, it was just technical leadership. In some cases, it was people management, but leads of whatever kind. In another case, I helped evaluate a CTO for the company. In 2 other cases, gave my input on a certain person, whether he's a fit for the job. In another case, I helped set up an iOS team by hiring multiple engineers for the company. Recently, a friend of mine called me because his iOS team has trouble. The engineers feel diffident. The coding practices are not on par with Android in the backend. So he wants me to kind of both inspire people and also tell them what they need to do, because they are feeling helpless. Like they're saying, we know we are asked to do a better job, but what does that mean?
Okay.
So it's both inspiration and concrete technical guidelines. In another case, and I'll just stop with this, in another case, I evaluated a company's code and told them not to build on this code anymore and to rebuild it from scratch.
That had to hurt. Are these folks, so at the time when they're really feeling the pain, they're really in the hot seat, they're a couple years in probably, they've tried a bunch of things that's not working. What does their customer base look like at that point? Are they like, I don't know, thousands of monthly active users, hundreds of thousands, millions? Like what kind of scale do you help them reach?
So typically I have worked with relatively early stage companies. One of them, for example, it was B2B. Their biggest customer was paying them $200K a year. And their servers were serving 1 billion requests a month.
1 billion a month? Okay.
But the others have been at a slightly lower scale. And in some cases, the scale as measured in traffic was low, but the value was high.
Okay.
So, but you can kind of generalize all of these as relatively early stage, not so early stage that they don't have a product out. They have a product out, it has reached a certain level of usage, but it's not a scalability thing where, you have like 100 million or 10 million users.
They're not, well, so they're just at that early stage where they've got traction, they've sort of proven the concept, they're either getting tons of requests or they're paying a significant amount of money for the platform or the SaaS or whatever it is. And so the founder and the investors are pretty sure there's something here, but the code just keeps the app just keeps falling over, and the teams are getting frustrated. There's like a lack of technical leadership. Maybe it's, I mean, it feels like, I'm trying to think back through the cases you mentioned. It feels like in every case it's a lack of technical leadership.
And a lack of management leadership, because every technical problem, when you root cause it, is a management problem, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, and that's what I meant. So like they don't know how to. This is just, it could be screwed up at any point, but it's manager / leadership problem on the tech side.
Yes, and it manifests in multiple dimensions. Typically, it's not focused only on, let's say, scalability.
Right. All right. So could be volume, high value, high volume. Okay. And you said not hardware. All right. So how would, if you can think back, even if you wanted to search your email or wherever it might be, when you get introduced by referral to one of these founders who's in this situation, how does the friend of a friend introduce you? Or like, do you know how they would describe you?
They would typically say something like, he's a senior experienced engineer. He used to work at Google. He can help you with the problems you're facing, or something of that kind. In some cases, I'm introduced as a software engineer, which may make people think that, I bang on a laptop and, just churn out code.
Yeah.
In those cases, I tell them that's not exactly what I do. Like, I can do that, but that's not what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of a cross between a CTO or VPE, or like almost like a recruiter.
Yep.
So,
I mean, the way I would look at it is, recruiting is also part of the CTO's responsibilities, right? So it really falls under the CTO umbrella.
I mean, it depends on how big the company is, right? Like,
Sure.
how many employees are we talking about at a company that would be your sweet spot?
Typically 10 or so engineers, though the biggest has been 30, 40 engineers.
Okay.
And when there's a CTO, like you just pointed out, the dynamic is different. There I'm more like helping him succeed rather than helping the company as a whole succeed.
Right.
And typically I'm called in when there's a skill gap. For example, he doesn't know iOS.
Okay.
And there I'm more like, for lack of a better word, like my job is to help him succeed.
Okay.
So in that case, you're right. I'm not playing the CTO role. I'm playing like a VP role.
Okay. And how do you feel about those gigs where there is a CTO with a skill gap versus there really isn't strong technical leadership?
So there's a pro and a con. If there's no CTO, I get to have far more influence on the company's direction and things, For example, I might advise them, look, you can't build more features if you also want to improve the UX and improve the mobile app and improve scalability and do this and do that with a, very small team. Right. So, I get to have more strategic impact and input there if there's no CTO.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it can also be a messy situation, and it might take multiple months to earn trust.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if there's a CTO, typically the problem I get is much more contained. Like, for example, our iOS engineers are unhappy and, the quality isn't what we want. So it's typically contained, and the first level of validation has been done on the problem. Whereas if there's no CTO, they may say, we have a problem with our cloud setup, when the problem may have nothing to do with the cloud setup, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The self-diagnosis thing you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. So it would seem to me that if there's a CTO and you're focused on it makes total sense what you just said. If there's a CTO and they just know that they've got a specific gap and you can fill it, it feels like much more contained. It also feels smaller and potentially less valuable, but you tell me, does the value seem higher or lower, or it doesn't correlate? In other words, the fee that you could charge to help an existing CTO with a skill gap versus coming in and having a much bigger influence on the entire company.
The fee wouldn't be any lower if there's a CTO. Mm-hmm. If anything, it might be slightly higher, because the company is typically at a bigger scale if they have a CTO. So even if the problem is smaller, a smaller problem for a bigger company is a bigger problem, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Or a smaller value add when multiplied by a bigger number, like more millions of dollars at stake.
Okay.
It has more value, right? So yeah. So I would say that if there is a CTO, I can charge at least as much.
So that seems like a more for you that would seem like a more attractive avenue to pursue, I would think, because it's a smaller, more contained problem and the value is perhaps even higher.
Sure.
So why would you want a bigger problem for less money when you could solve a smaller, for you, smaller scope of work for more money? And so what kind of skill gaps are you capable of? So if we focused on this, there's a CTO and there's like one thing that they're not good at. Maybe it's iOS, maybe it's Android, maybe it's Azure, like that for some reason they need to be on Azure or whatever. You know, they have experience with AWS, but not this, and they have to be there for some reason, or it's something, I don't know. It's like, well, you tell me, what are some of the gaps that you've helped people with? What are the things that you feel like you could come in and be perceived as an expert about a particular thing, even to another sort of fellow CTO type?
Sure. There are a couple of kinds of skill gaps I can think about. One is a specific technology like iOS or image processing. You know, you talk about niching down. I am an expert in image processing on the iPhone, which is like a double niche, image and video processing. So in some cases, I've been called in for that. Or it could just be iOS without image processing. So a specific technology is one kind of a skill gap. The other kind of a skill gap is, to put it impolitely, sometimes you have CTOs who are CTOs in namesake, or they're more junior and, you know, they're still building up their career. It's their first startup. As a technical co-founder, you know, they are also the CTO. But really, you know, in some cases, they're like, please advise us, right? Because you're clearly ahead of us. Or it could also be someone very experienced, more experienced than me perhaps, but he has become only a people manager for the last 5 to 8 years, and he has forgotten everything technical. The third case of a skill gap might be more of a market thing. If an American company wants to set up an India office, how do I help them hire? How does hiring work in India? You know, how do I advise them on, you know, some of the cultural issues, and how do you work effectively with Americans as opposed to Indians and all of these things, right? So skill gaps could be in these categories.
Well, that last one is very interesting because you mentioned that you wanted to start selling into the US and other developed countries, right?
Yes.
Who would want to set up an Indian location? Why would they want to do that?
One common reason at the early stage is just the cost.
So to save money.
Yes. The other is access to talent and ease of hiring.
Can't hire in the US fast enough, or it's too expensive, or nobody wants to work. Okay, so tell me more about this. Have you done this before? It sounds like you have.
I mean, I've had a couple of conversations, but they didn't convert into an actual paying engagement.
This seems, I mean, this is just hypothetical. I don't know if there's any demand for this. But if you've had a couple of conversations and people are sort of interested, then it makes me feel like there might be. It certainly makes sense financially if you could develop your own team in a place where you could pay people a nice salary for them that isn't painful to you, and they're actually people who want to work. Then let's say just explore this for a second. If someone who's thinking about doing that, it's like we can't get enough developers at a price we want, at a price that we can afford. Wouldn't my alternatives be like going with like a huge shop over there? Like why would I set up my own shop?
I mean, I'm talking about hiring on their payroll, not outsourcing a project, and not even staff augmentation, but they want their own team.
Why would they want that versus staff aug or like an agency or something?
Well, the typical reasons: you have a greater sense of mission. They'll be more amenable to following your directions, and they'll understand the company culture more. And it'll just feel like one team rather than, you know, different people from different things somehow working together.
I would imagine it would also contribute to their valuation if they were looking to be acquired or whatever. All right.
And the costs are also lower. And many competent people don't want to work for a services company. So, you know, then you're getting access to often second-tier talent. Or if you're getting access to first-tier talent via an agency, it's extremely expensive. In which case, you might as well hire in the US.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so what stage? So if we think back to your kind of description of ideal buyers from your past client list, and we're talking about they currently have maybe 10 engineers. Are they a candidate for a service like this, like setting up their own office? Or would that be something that a larger client would want?
In some cases, smaller clients have wanted that. In some cases, they've already established a US office and they're expanding. And there are dozens of people in the US and they want to expand further. So one company I spoke to has probably 70 people in the US and 80 or so in India.
Yeah, that is a little bit more what I would expect just as an outsider. I would feel like they would have probably it seems to me, like, totally could be wrong, but just from other conversations with folks who do stuff like you, that the company's fairly mature by the time they would want to do something like this. Is that your experience? Or like someone is like brand new, they have some like fascinating demo, they've got a great pitch deck, they get $500K or $1 million from investor based on proof of concept or something, and then step one, like where the developer that made that, there must be an engineer that made that. Are they usually like technical co-founder, or was it like a non-technical founder and they just got somebody from Upwork or TopTal or something and to just cobble this thing together? Like, is it possible that they have no team?
No team at all anywhere in the world is a rare situation. Like there are one or two that have done this. They've hired some freelancers and but typically they do have a team. Either they're setting up their company and they're setting up both the US and the India office simultaneously, or the more established case that we talked about, having 70 people in the US and 80 people in India. In that case, the nature of the engagement is not so much set up an India office, but help us with this problem we are facing in the India office, such as attrition or people not being engaged or whatever it may be.
Okay. That seems all right. So for something specific, like, how would you scope an engagement if somebody came to you and said, we've got 10 or 15 devs in the US or wherever, and we want to set up an office where we can sort of double that. We can double our team size, but to control costs, we want to do it in India, let's say. How would you, what am I looking at? Let's say I'm the client. What am I looking at? Can you give me a ballpark? That's what I was going to say. Can you give me a ballpark for setting up a 10-person iOS team in India? Like, what's your reaction there? What's your gut instinct?
Gut instinct is $1 million a year.
For total out of pocket or for you?
No, for the company in terms of salaries.
Right. How much do they need to pay you to do it?
So typically hiring one person, I charge $19K. And this is when I kind of say that this person is good. After that, whether they join or not, that's kind of out of my control. So it's not really $19K for each person hired, but $19K for each person I sign off on. Yeah. And if they have a smaller budget, we can kind of limit the number of people I'll interview and say, why don't you do the first round of interviews? Find me the 10 best people. And if we scope it down that way, I can do it for much less than $19K.
Okay, so it's a pure recruiter model. So you would say like it's this much to locate qualified candidates. So just right. not even and vet. You must vet them to a certain extent to say that they're qualified. So it's find and vet qualified candidates who'd be interested in this particular position. Do you help them like draft the job description and decide what the makeup of the overall team should be before you start hiring, or is that they just
Absolutely.
do that? Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's the strategy session. Like, what skills do you need and why do you need them? And what business outcomes do you want? And you need to go back and plan the hiring for all of those. So that 6 months later, you don't say, why is this not happening, right? And then what about leads? If you have so many engineers, do you also need a designer? Otherwise, how will the front-end engineers build a polished app? And then what about managers? What about the architect role? And
Right.
who's playing the PM role here?
So you help them design an org chart, basically.
Exactly.
And then it's like a $19K $ on each one of those positions.
Right. So the strategy session costs $19K, and I also write JDs. If necessary, I also connect them with a couple of recruiters in India whom I know and have worked with, though that's not something kind of which I take responsibility for, more in terms of just connecting them. Then I set up an interview process. Okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to give them a take-home assignment to begin with, or is it going to happen after one round of interview? and what are the areas that we are going to evaluate for each of these positions. And so this is all the strategy session, planning it. Then the interviews, for each person, it's a separate fee if they want me to do it. Or if they say, okay, this is great, now we'll go ahead and execute, that's also fine. A middle ground can also be training their engineers on hiring. For that, I would charge $4K per person.
Say that again. There's a middle ground is training their engineers what?
On hiring effectively.
Okay, so you maybe hire this sort of senior level of the org chart and then teach them how to fill in underneath.
Or also the junior people to hire each other. If you have a front-end engineer, can he interview other front-end engineers? So train them on. So basically the way I put it is, do you want me to give you a fish or do you want me to teach your team to fish?
Okay.
The second one will result in a self-sufficient organization rather than being dependent on me.
Right. But presumably slower or presumably take longer for them to actually get it right.
The biggest problem with that is the opportunity cost. They say we need to deliver software yesterday. How can we have our engineers do this?
Got it. Okay. So this sounds like a really nice, this particular service. I wouldn't call this an overall, this is like very narrow compared to all of the things that you've listed that you do, but it's very easy to get your head around this particular one. And it's a nice theory. It's a hypothesis that there would be demand for something like this. And it's pretty easy to tie it to, cost savings or solving some of these problems that they are experiencing just based on something being wrong, resulting in the tech being garbage. So they're disappointing people who they don't want to disappoint. They don't know what to do about it, or they think, and perhaps they think they want to set up an Indian office, or you talk to them and diagnose the situation, and you're like, well, we could set up an office over here, and that will solve these problems. It's very easy to get your head around, and it sounds like you've got 3 different tiers of service where you could just do the design, the strategy part. You could do that and do the hiring. Like you can give them options so they can dial up or down depending on how fast they want to go and how much they want to spend. So that feels like something I would create a sales page for, and then perhaps, there's like a million other things going on. There's like a bunch of other things that I'm ignoring right now in terms of like things you could do. I was also kind of interested in the image and video processing on iOS, because me, I'm always going to like something that's super specific, because somebody's going to know they even someone non-technical, a non-technical founder is going to know they have that problem.
Yes.
So that, just as a quick tangent, that would be a really interesting thing to write a book about, because it'd be like, who wrote the book on this? And we've got this problem. And then either, does anybody know who's an expert on this? If there was a book on that by you, I would, assuming anybody's got this problem, I would think that that'd be a really good lead source. But that's just an aside. So if we stick with this sort of, what do you call this? That sort of team design, or like, is there a name that you usually use to describe this setting up an office for people?
So for setting up an office, I don't have a name, but if they already have a team, even if it's a skeleton team, they just say, help us with hiring. So I just call it hiring. Maybe I need to come up with a better name. And I do have a sales page, which is my homepage, and I have a bunch of packages with public prices.
Okay, that's cool. And is this one of them?
Yes, this is one of them.
All right, but currently, this is way more specific than hiring in my mind.
Yeah, setting up the India office is not one of the things that's listed on the website. Yes.
Okay. So it would be pretty easy to take a first pass at a sales page for this thing that had really clear pain, dream, fix language and 3 tiers, or 3 ways to engage.
Yep.
And you could make guesses about who's the ideal buyer, and then you could go back to your network with that particular offering and say, hey, I'm doing this new thing. Could you give me some feedback on the page? Does this make sense? Could you just review this for me? Kind of like, hey, could you do me a solid and take a look at this and see if it makes sense? If you have any questions, I'm trying to work on the FAQ section. I want to get some actual frequently asked questions, and just get feedback from people in your network about it. and see if Rolodex moments happen. See if they're like, you know what? I know somebody who was just telling me they can't hire fast enough, or was just telling me that they can find devs, but they're too expensive, or the devs are all prima donnas, or they want to get rid of their agency. They're feeling held hostage by this agency and they're over a barrel and they want to just build their own team. But they can't, but they don't want to do it in the US, or they can't do it in the US or something like that. And,
Sure.
and see if you could set, and have like the call to action be like, set up a phone call to see if there's a fit. And it's just like a link to your Calendly or something. And it sounds like you've already got prices too. So you could even put prices on the page. So if someone did come to that page and they're like, wow, this is like totally reasonable, because you're talking about it in very specific terms. Like if you need this many people, it's going to probably $1 million.
Yep.
You're going to have $1 million a year in salary. My fee will be a tiny fraction of that.
Mm-hmm.
So compared to what they're prepared to spend, it's no big deal. And then if they would like want to talk to you just to, it's like, a friend recommended us, but, or spoke highly of you, but we still want to talk to you to kind of sniff around and see if we feel like we have a warm and fuzzy feeling, and then boom, off to the races. So this feels like a really high value, easy to justify productized service.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's say you had that sales page that was specific to that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a name. It's like very productized. It's packaged, right? And then so then now let's finally loop back to the stuff that didn't work. So you did a bunch of really smart things like that can work. For any of them not to work, like the probably most common reason that something like, asking your network to share information about you in these channels that you're not in, and you sharing information about yourself in channels that you are in, looking for partners and talking to VCs and investors, and all of these things are really good. If they didn't work, the main reason is that it would feel like the positioning is not clear enough for them to connect the dots. If there is, because if you think of the reasons people aren't buying, like the first one is they're not aware of you, but through this networking, they perhaps, let's assume the right people are aware of you. People you could help are aware that you exist.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is like, well, they don't get that what you do is a solution to a problem they have. That's the very likely let me just say that is a common problem, that people are like, oh, nice to meet you. What do you do? And you tell them and they're like, okay. And like, they don't get it. Like they don't get that you could help them.
Yep.
If they do get it, that you could help them, obviously, if they don't have the problem, they don't have the problem. So let's assume they have the problem. Then it could be that they don't believe it. So like they say, all right, I'm aware of you. I know that you solve a problem that I have, but I don't believe that you actually can do it. Whether they don't trust, it's not you specifically. Like it could be that they don't trust you, or it could be that they don't trust themselves to follow through, or it could be that they just don't think it's going to work for some reason. So they just don't find it credible that this solution could solve their problem.
Yes.
And then if they do believe all those things, they're aware of you, they understand how you can help them, they believe that your solution will fix their problem. The last one is the problem is not worth as much as you're charging. So in other words, you're charging more than it's worth to them to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's the problem, because you said that when you do get someone on a phone call, if they're a good fit, they'll close the deal. So I don't think it's the price. And I don't think it's the last one. I don't think it's the first one, because you did a whole bunch of things that are smart things to do to increase awareness in a market.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like it's one of the middle two, where either they haven't connected the dots between what you do and a problem that they have. It's more likely it's that. And then the less likely one, in my opinion, just gut instinct, is that, yeah, we'd really like to find someone that could really do this for us, but you're not the person for some reason. That feels doubtful for the same reason as the price. Why I don't think it's pricing, because when you do finally talk to someone, then they're like, you can close the deal. So it feels like a positioning problem, or could be messaging, which doesn't surprise me because you do like 50 million things.
Sure.
So let's get specific about when you like, let's pick a Slack. You said you're in a bunch of Slacks, like ex-Googlers and stuff like that.
Yes.
Would would people, your ideal buyers, would like sort of non-technical founders, who've got a few years of experience under their belt and they're very frustrated because their balls are dropping. They wouldn't be in there, right? Like they're not in that room, or are they?
I mean, the vast majority of people aren't ex-Googlers, so they're not in that room.
Right. So who are you in a group where those people would be, or do you know people that are like those actual people?
I mean, two of the people I've worked with are ex-Googlers,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of connected with me via the Slack or whichever way it might be, since there's a connection anyway,
Mm-hmm.
um, or a WhatsApp group, whichever the thing may be. Now, I'm sure there are quite a few Googlers who could benefit from my services
Mm-hmm.
because there are like probably hundreds or thousands of Google alumni who are doing startups at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's someone somewhere, but we haven't been able to connect.
Hmm. So check this out. So this new, well, no, it's not a new idea, but the idea of having this new sales page for building a team, like internal remote team, probably would be of interest to lots of people in there. Like you're saying, right? I'm just kind of saying back to you the same thing, right?
Sure.
Like that particular thing might be super interesting. Maybe I feel like some of the other like the CTO skill up stuff I wrote down is like the highly specific, image processing on iOS, or the CTO and name only, they were promoted from lead dev and they're really not quite ready, or the rusty skill set because they're just managing people for the last few years. Those feel a lot less likely. Maybe the image one, but that feels like a much more of a long shot than the set up an Indian team. Just thinking about that one Slack. Do you agree or not really?
I mean, yes, I do agree, because if someone is setting up an India team, it is going to be a substantial engagement and there's an immediate need.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that's I like about it the most is it's the least personally threatening to the other compared to the other ones. The other ones force the ex-Googler to admit something they might not want to admit.
Absolutely.
They don't want to say they have a skill gap, but they'll be perfectly happy to say we can't hire fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you set up a sales page for this thing and then reached out and just in all of these Slacks, if you did another round of this very smart move, the very smart move to do, outreach to, I think you said you did cold outreach to a list of startups that should be in your target market, and asking networks to share, looking for partners. Who would you partner with on this one? This one?
I think with a design agency.
Yeah, that could be. But would it be the design agency that wants to set up a tech function, or would it be that they have clients that need a team set up?
Yeah, they have clients that need a team setup. So for example, these guys are going to deliver a beautiful intuitive design. And then what happens? Someone needs to implement it.
Right. So you could network your way into like some group of like Figma users or product people, right? And say like, hey, if you've got any clients that are really looking to step on the gas and you don't want them to spend all of their money on an engineering team because you want to still have a piece of the pie. Okay, so that makes sense. So the question would be, so you're at a cocktail party, because I know you're always at cocktail parties, and and you're like, oh yeah, we run a design agency. We've got a bunch of Figma jockeys that are banging out, whatever you call it, UX wireframes or whatever they are, clickable prototypes. You're like, oh, let me know. Do you have any clients who'd love to set up an engineering team, a developer team in India, so that they, aren't burning through their runway faster than they need to? It's just so non-threatening, right? They would probably be like, yeah, I think I do. Or I'll run that by. It's like there's something in it for them. So that does make sense. And now the VC investor thing, or private equity or something like that, I've talked to a few people who've gone down this path. And it's on the surface, it makes a lot of sense because they have all, portfolio companies. They're probably all tech, and they're probably all going to have a similar set of problems, which is they can't hire fast enough, or the code quality is just too low because they're going too fast and they can't get people, good enough people, or something is just going wrong. But when I've gone deeper on this, their tendency is to throw money at the problem to solve the near term, and they just go with like a huge I can't remember the name of it, but there's like one or two usual suspects for like 400-pound gorilla in India that just has like tens of thousands of developers or something crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and they just write the check, and it's just like instantaneous. There's no, they have a huge bench, so it's just like write the check, get it done, and move on. And they're not as concerned, about hiring up a team. But let me think about that. Let me think back to that. Why would they?
If it helps, I can tell you what the VCs have told me.
Yeah, please.
So one of them told me that this is too core. Whatever is ancillary, we can support them, be it HR, legal, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But marketing or user acquisition and building the product, these are core things that the startup needs to have in-house.
Got it.
Was one kind of fund's philosophy. Another said that we tried it out, it didn't work. We had full-timers, it didn't work out. Then we shifted to consultants, then it didn't work out. So we have stopped that. And the third said we don't invest unless there's a CTO.
Wait, say that last one again, please.
The third VC fund said that we don't invest unless there's a CTO already on staff. So at that point, he has gotten things more or less under control. And if something is needed, he can kind of bring in others. But it would, like, we don't want to force you down their throat. It will send the wrong signal.
True. Okay.
Because we are also investing in them.
Okay, so that tells me that the conversation was around bringing you in as a consulting CTO, not as someone to build a team in India for them. So, right.
I mean, whatever it may be, right? Like, irrespective of the specific services, it was like they'll take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. So I am not surprised. I mean, I am not surprised to hear what you just said, which is that for those two core functions, they want to hire in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Although I've heard different that they will just bring in other people, but it doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like I got bad information, because what you're saying makes way more sense. And the argument of, or the point that that last person made was like, we don't want to jam a CTO down their throat. It's like, that would send the wrong message. It's like, yeah, that I agree. That would be bad. It's like replacing the drummer in the Beatles, It's like,
Yes.
it's like, the drummer stinks. You're out. That's like very bad for the other three people in the band. So, okay. So I've, again, can't guarantee anything, but my hypothesis is, if you could put together a compelling sales page for that one thing, the building up the Indian office, building up the Indian team of full-time employees, it'll cost you, like sort of total cost of ownership of the offices, something like $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you could ballpark, did you say the design of the org chart is $19K also? Is like the same price as?
Yes, all that comes under the strategy session, the hiring strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Be it the org chart, be it the roles, be it how many front-end engineers do we need.
And that's
the JD.
$19K USD.
Yes.
Okay. And then if they want you to start hiring, it's $19K per qualified candidate?
Exactly.
Okay. It's a little weird that it's the same number. It's almost confusing.
Got it. Maybe I'll change.
Yeah, I know it's stupid, but that confused me before, and
It makes sense. Hearing it from you, it made sense immediately.
Yeah. So if you could, you're right. So oh man, I really like this one. I would want you to test the heck out of this, because, and find out, and if you get objections, find out specifically what they are in that list of 4 things. It won't be awareness because you're talking to someone. It could be that they don't see the solution to the problem, but it won't be, because they will see the solution to the problem, because it's obvious what problem this solves, and it's a common problem. And then it becomes, some kind of, the credibility one is like, they don't believe it'll work for some reason. Why don't they believe it'll work? It could be them. It could be that, I don't know. What are some reasons why somebody be like, yeah, it would be nice to have a full-time team that we, of 10 people that we only have to pay $1 million a year. That would be amazing. But what are some objections? Probably are things like, but it'll take too long to get them all hired and trained. We need to move faster than that. Or it could be like, we believe that someone from the core founding team would need to be there to manage them, and we don't want to be traveling that much. Or the we don't believe that you can guarantee us high quality applicants, like as good as US developers. What are some other objections?
Oh, so typically, I mean, like one specific objection I've heard here is we don't want to outsource the hiring to you. We want to sign off. And in that process, we'll get to know whom we are hiring and a bond will be formed both ways.
I have heard that exact complaint in similar scenarios. So they don't want you to do the hiring part. They just want you to bring them qualified candidates, and then they'll decide, like, from whether it's a culture fit or whatever. They want to vibe. They want to vibe with the candidates and see if they're a good fit. Oh man.
Yes.
All right.
And in this case, they have a hiring process already. If you ask them, how do you hire a mobile engineer? They'll tell you. So they want to follow the same process in India. They don't want help on the core hiring. Perhaps they want some advice on the local market conditions and how you go about it. So for example, in India, salaries are invariably decided based on the previous salary. Whereas, as I understand, in some states in the US, that's illegal
I've
to
never
ask
heard
what
of it.
was your previous salary.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Yeah, it's probably true. I've never heard of people doing that.
Yeah. So there are some things that are different here that you need to do differently in order to succeed. So yeah, that could be the thing, because I don't do sourcing. Recruiters do that, right? So if they want to do the
So what do you mean you don't do sourcing?
sourcing as in get me 100 CVs of front-end engineers, that kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So the recruiters specialize in that. They have access to databases and networks and so on. So that's what they do. Once the people come in, I evaluate them, such as by conducting interviews or take-home assignments or what have you.
Yep.
But if the US team wants to do that, then I'm focusing on an advisory role.
Yep. Okay. I love it. So you basically you'll either, if they want you to vet them, you will, but if not, then fine. So and you don't do anything. You really don't do anything else. You're not finding the resumes. And if they were like, no, we'll vet them ourselves, then you're pretty much, would you oversee the recruit? Like, would you be the one that got the recruiters to bring in the resumes? Like, are you outsource that piece, or would you tell them, here's a recruiter, they'll get you 100 resumes. You can either give them to me to vet, or you can do it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I typically connect them, but I do more than just send an introductory email. So for example, I know one lady who specializes in hiring only back-end engineers. And, she has an approach of quality over quantity. So based on all these things, I'll kind of connect and coordinate, but not so much as subcontract.
Yep.
Finally,
Okay.
it is the two sides working together.
Good.
I might also bring in people from my network, be it engineers, managers, architects, if they're interested. That's more of an informal help. It's not part of the engagement per se.
Right. Okay. Yeah. This ticks a lot of boxes. So I feel like it's very easy to connect the dots between what you do and a problem that they have, and the number. You can give them numbers. You can very easily describe what your participation would be and what the optional pieces are, and give prices for all of those things. And then there'd be some list of objections perhaps, and those either you could learn from in reverse, or you could just be like, oh, well, this client's just not that good of a fit because the objections they're bringing indicate that they're not ready for this. They're not prepared to commit the amount of money that they need to, or something. They're just not ready.
Got it.
Yeah. So that is what I would do. If you're looking for like action items from the conversation, I would draft up that sales page, because you could start with just like a non-marketing, non-sales, just a description, almost like a timeline of what would be involved, just to like share it with somebody like me or other people in like other fellow consultant types, not clients, but just like just to get your own head around it, and say like, okay, this is what it would look like. This is how much. Make sure you're charging enough. It sounds like you're really comfortable with your prices already, and then say, all right, let me draft this up as a sales page, bounce it off your network, and see if anybody has a Rolodex moment. If they're like, oh man, this would be perfect for somebody I know, and set up, and with the goal being set up as many phone calls as humanly possible with people who might be interested in this, and have conversations with them, take tons of notes about any objections or questions that they ask, and then plow that information right back into the page before the next phone call, and just sort of like, take the sales page on a world tour, and say like, oh, I'm just trying to make this page better. I want to make sure everybody understands it. I want to make sure it answers anybody's questions. So I'm trying to find all the questions that anybody might have about this. And, maybe what are the guarantees? Like how long do you, what will churn be? Like what will the employee churn be? All that stuff. It's like, and then you could take some of your other services and layer them on after the fact. So like, at some point you have filled the org chart as promised, or it is filled as promised. And then it's like, okay, you could stay on perhaps as like, in an advisory role to keep the team happy and humming along and or advising the person who is doing that. So if there's like a VPE there or whoever the top on-site person would be.
Makes a lot of.
Yeah, this ticks tons of boxes. And I know it's a tiny fraction of all the things you can do, but it's so easy to understand, and the incentives and the sort of ego of it, all of the egos involved. Like nobody you'd be involved with wants to do that job that you're doing. Nobody's like, that should be my job. I want to do that. No one's going to want to do that. So it's like the perfect thing for you to be like, hey, I can do this.
This makes a lot of sense. Because as you point out, some of the other services I offer, I may have to disagree with their decisions, and then we get into tricky territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly. No one wants to hear rewrite the code base.
Yes.
But everybody wants to hear, hey, we've got 10 developers ready to go. It's done. Or it's so much more aspirational and optimistic, and yeah, it's a nicer feel. Anyway, so if that's something that you enjoy doing or would be happy to do, that's when I would pick. Take the sales page on a world tour. If you want to shoot me a link, like if you draft up a Google Doc with like an outline for the sales page, I'd be happy to take a look at it.
I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Has this helped at all? Or does it feel like something, or are you just being nice to me and saying, yeah, great idea?
No, I'm very happy to have an action item.
Cool.
And since I since I respect you, coming from a respected or a trusted source, right, it means I can execute without having to ask myself 10 different questions about this.
Right.
So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. Great. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I also have a few more things I was thinking of doing. Many of the ideas come from you. I'll just quickly mention them. If anything is worth commenting on, would love to hear. If not, that's also fine.
Yeah, go for it.
One is to make LinkedIn slideshows, because currently I do YouTube. Mm-hmm. Also to get quoted by journalists as an expert on a certain topic. Mm-hmm. So that will generate pull rather than push me calling people.
Right.
And speak at conferences. Mm-hmm. And guest on YouTube channels or podcasts. Guess I made a beginning today, but in general, I could do more of this.
Right. Those things they're more tactics, right? So those are more tactics like you did before, and the success or failure of those tactics will depend 100% on the positioning or like the messaging, like that people in the audience of, air quotes audience, or the people on LinkedIn reading the slideshows or whatever, that they see themselves immediately. They say, this is for me. First thing they see is like, oh, this is for me. And then they swipe to the next slide, or they listen to a few more minutes, and it's like, I totally have this problem. This is exactly my problem. And this is the solution I'm looking for, or this is a possible solution that I hadn't thought of before. And,
got it.
So it, like any of these things could work. I mean, you could use hot air balloons and skywriters, but the message is the part that you have to get right, so that people can digest the information from like a cold start, right? Like all of this stuff in your head, it's in there. You live with it. It's all the stories that you have from years and years of experience. Mm-hmm. And then someone's meeting you cold for the first time, and you have to boil it all down to something they care about, and have it not be like, I'm not saying this is you, but this is what most people do, where it's like, oh, I can do a million things. I can help everyone. I can do anything you need. And it's like, okay, but how does that help me? Like so any of these things could work. I wouldn't, what I would do, so a couple of things you mentioned everything has pros and cons. I like to test my messaging to make sure that it's clicking with the people I want it to click with, the cheapest, fastest possible way. And then once I know that I've got the messaging, or I've got the words, configured in a way that clicks with the people I want to have conversations with, then I'd start to like put a little bit more effort into the polish or the going to other people's audiences, or because it's it's work and it takes time, and you want it to produce some kind of results, or you want to have an impact for this particular audience that you're trying to reach or trying to serve. So it's on us as the expert or the authority or the whatever the thing is that we're good at. It's on us to figure out what language to use so that the people we can help who don't know anything that's in our head and are only going to hear and remember one thing that comes out of our mouth. What's that one thing? So you could do that. Yeah. So cheap ways to test that are like in tweets, in Slack rooms, in LinkedIn groups, in DMs, in maybe once you start to, you start feeling like you're starting to find something, you want to zoom in on it or test a particular message. You could maybe set up a webinar. I think people you could do cold outreach. If you can make cold outreach work, you've got your messaging down. But just sharing it in groups, in the Google group, right? The Googlers group, and be like, hey, does anybody know somebody that's experiencing these kinds of symptoms? Can't hire fast enough, can't afford the people they find, they want to decrease their monthly burn or whatever, whatever it is. And then when people start saying yes and want to introduce you, then you're onto something.
Got it.
So yeah, but let's say you did have your messaging down. Yeah, go on, start your own YouTube channel talking about considerations of hiring in India, or like some area of expertise that makes you unique and differentiates you from other people, and like why you're different from just a plain old recruiter, or why you're different from someone who would maybe do this in the US. But I would do you're in a phase, I'm pretty sure you're in a phase where you're trying to figure out the right messaging. You're trying to like dial in the messaging to be something.
Yes.
So I wouldn't go nuts with anything difficult. I would just do really easy stuff, like social media, or maybe a mailing list, maybe your own podcast or your own YouTube channel, so people can get to know you and trust you, and then be like, whether or not it's and hopefully it's of interest to them. So those things are nice because you have total control over them. You don't have to wait and be on someone else's schedule. So maybe a mailing list in a YouTube channel, or a mailing list in a podcast. Those are, those are my defaults.
Got it.
And then promote those things in social media and see if it gets any traction. That's like relatively speaking, that's very easy, and you don't have to ask for anyone's permission. You don't have to work on someone else's schedule.
Got it.
Right. And any of those things that you mentioned, they could work. It really depends on where it's a refinement. Once you have the messaging, and it's like, well, where do my people hang out? Maybe it's LinkedIn. What do they like on LinkedIn? Do they like videos, or do they like slides? So it just becomes iterative kind of optimization of producing and publishing the content.
Makes sense.
Cool. It sounded like you had other things on your list too.
I mean, these are the main ones.
Okay.
So I'm very happy that I have an action item. I'll go work on this.
Cool. All right. Well, let's say someone knows someone that they want to introduce you to. Where can they go to find out more about what you're doing and maybe get in touch?
The best place is my website. I also have my YouTube channel, which I'll mention.
Oh,
it's
good.
also linked on the website, but yeah, you can also go directly to YouTube if you're more interested in learning about specific topics.
Cool. Yeah, send that over after we hang up, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time on Ditching Hourly. Bye.